I'm Jess Harper, 29, and I never thought I'd end up in the middle of a family storm that'd make a soap opera look tame. I'm from a small town outside of Portland, Oregon, where the trees outnumber the people and everybody knows your business. My grandpa Frank passed away a couple of months ago, and it turned my world upside down. I found out through a misfired text from my cousin that I wasn't supposed to know about the will reading. My stomach twisted, but I decided to show up anyway. When I walked into that lawyer's office, my Aunt Karen's face went sour. "We've already sorted everything," she said, her voice sharp. "You weren't supposed to be here." The lawyer, a quiet guy with glasses, raised an eyebrow. "Actually, her name's the only one in the will." The room froze. If you've ever felt like your family's left you out in the cold, hit that like button and drop a comment about where you're from. Family messes are universal, and I'd love to know how you've dealt with them. This is my story, and trust me, it's a wild ride. Growing up, I was the kid of my grandpa Frank's youngest daughter, Lisa. Life wasn't always smooth. My dad, Mike, was a mechanic who loved fixing things, cars, bikes, even people's broken spirits. My mom worked as a diner waitress, always smelling like coffee and fryer grease. They taught me to value hard work over flashy stuff. Every weekend, we'd pile into Dad's old pickup and head to Grandpa Frank's cabin on the edge of town, a cozy place surrounded by pines, with a porch swing that creaked like it was telling stories. It was my safe spot. When I was 13, Dad died in a car accident. A drunk driver took him from us. Mom fell apart, picking up extra shifts to keep us fed. Grandpa Frank stepped in, no questions asked. "Jess, you're with me half the week," he said, his voice gruff but kind. For years, I bounced between Mom's tiny apartment and his cabin, where he became more than a grandpa. He was my rock. Grandpa Frank wasn't your typical old guy with money. He'd made his cash running a small lumber business, but he lived simply: flannel shirts, worn boots, and a beat-up truck. He'd spend his mornings splitting wood and his evenings volunteering at the local food bank. That cabin was his pride, filled with hand-carved furniture and photos of our family's history, not some show-off mansion. My Uncle Tom and Aunt Karen, though, were different. They had big houses in the city, drove fancy SUVs, and always pushed Grandpa to act rich. When I chose to become a physical therapist, working with veterans at a local clinic, they didn't get it. At a family barbecue when I was 22, Uncle Tom pulled me aside, sipping a craft beer. "Jess, you could work for my real estate firm. Why waste your life on a job that barely pays?" I just shrugged. I like helping people, not selling them stuff. My cousins, Sarah and Ethan, who'd gone to fancy colleges and worked for Tom, thought I was nuts. "Don't you want to be somebody?" Sarah asked once, dead serious. To them, money was everything. To me, it was about doing something real. As Grandpa got older, his arthritis got worse, and I started visiting more, bringing him groceries, helping with his meds, or just sitting on that porch swing, talking about life. We'd grill burgers. Using his secret sauce recipe with a kick of smoked paprika he swore nobody else knew. "You've got a good heart, Jess," he'd say, squinting at the sunset. "You see people, not their wallets." Those words stuck with me. He'd tell me stories about our family, how his great-grandma ran a boarding house during the Depression, or how his dad invented a tool that made logging faster. Stories about grit and heart, not just cash. Meanwhile, the rest of the family barely showed up. Uncle Tom would swing by once a month, mostly to check the cabin's foundation or talk about property values. Aunt Karen would drop off pricey gadgets Grandpa didn't need, then leave fast. My cousins only came for holiday dinners, if that. The year before Grandpa died, he gave me a small wooden box. "This was my mom's," he said, his hands shaky as he handed it to me. Inside was a plain silver ring, nothing fancy. "It's yours now. The others wouldn't get what it means." I hugged him, not knowing that ring would later be a weapon against me. A week before he passed, we sat on the porch, the air crisp with fall. He grabbed my hand, his grip strong despite his pain. "Jess, I've been watching everyone. I know who's real and who's not. I'm gonna make things right." I thought he meant finding peace, not rewriting our family's future. Point 3. Years ago, when Grandpa was 80, Uncle Tom called a family meeting at the cabin to discuss his care. I showed up to find a property developer there, talking about selling Grandpa's fishing cabin by the river, a place he'd loved since he was a kid. "It's just sitting there, costing money," Tom said, like it was no big deal. I looked at Grandpa, who was staring at the floor, his jaw tight. "Did you agree to this?" I asked. Tom waved me off. "He knows it's practical. He's too old to use it." I pushed back. "We were there last month. He wants to spend time there this summer." The developer shifted awkwardly, and Grandpa finally spoke. "I'm not selling. That's final." Tom's face went red, and after the developer left, he turned on me. You always stick your nose in, Jess. You don't get how much it costs to keep this place. I held my ground. It's not about money. It's about what Grandpa wants. That was the start of it, Tom's quiet war against me. He started whispering to the family that I was too close to Grandpa, hinting I was after his money. By the next Christmas, I felt the chill. Aunt Karen forgot to include me in the family card. Sarah made snide comments about gold diggers. Even my mom's brother, Uncle Dave, started acting distant that Christmas after the cabin meeting. The family dynamic shifted for good. I tried to keep things normal, showing up at Uncle Tom's big house in the suburbs for the holiday dinner, arms full of Grandpa's favorite homemade cranberry sauce. But the air was thick with unspoken grudges. Aunt Karen barely looked at me, fussing over her perfectly decorated table instead. Sarah whispered something to Ethan, and they both smirked, glancing my way. Uncle Dave, who used to sneak me extra pie slices when I was a kid, avoided me altogether. I caught bits of their hushed conversations, my name, laced with words like meddling and inheritance. Grandpa sat quietly, his hands folded, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He knew what was happening, and it hurt him. I sent emails to everyone after, trying to clear the air. I'm not after anything, I wrote. I just want Grandpa to be happy in his own way. Aunt Karen sent a curt reply, we all want what's best for Dad. Nobody else bothered to respond. By Easter, things got worse. I wasn't invited to the family gathering at Tom's place. I found out when Sarah posted photos online, Grandpa in the background, looking tired, surrounded by cousins who hadn't visited him in months. I called him that night. How was Easter? I asked, keeping my voice light. He sighed. Too loud. Too many people talking about things that don't matter. They didn't make my cornbread the way I like it. He paused, then added, I didn't know you weren't coming, Jess. My heart sank. They hadn't told him I was left out. I swallowed hard. I would have been there, Grandpa. The silence on his end said he understood more than he let on. As Grandpa's health took a turn, his arthritis making it harder to move, the family started controlling my visits. Aunt Karen set up a schedule to keep Dad from getting overwhelmed. I got 1 hour on Sundays, barely enough time to share a cup of coffee and catch up. Half the time, Sarah or Ethan would happen to drop by during my slot, cutting into our talks with their small talk about work or vacations. I got creative to stay close to Grandpa. I'd swing by on my lunch breaks from the clinic, bringing sandwiches to share. His caregiver, Rosa, was a godsend. She'd text me when Grandpa was having a good day or needed a familiar face. He lights up when you're here, she'd say, sneaking me in for extra time when no one else was around. The final Christmas before Grandpa passed was the hardest. I got a text from Aunt Karen, we're keeping things small this year. Dad needs rest. I later learned from Rosa that small meant everyone but me. I was crushed but didn't want Grandpa to miss out on our traditions. On Christmas Eve, I dropped off a package with Rosa, Grandpa's favorite burgers with that smoky sauce, a flannel scarf in his favorite green, and a scrapbook I'd made of old photos from his fishing cabin. Rosa called me later, whispering. He cried when he saw the scrapbook, Jess. Kept saying you're his real family. When Grandpa died in March, I didn't hear it from the family. Rosa called me, her voice breaking. I rushed to the cabin, but Uncle Tom and Aunt Karen were already there, talking to a funeral planner like it was a business meeting. Oh, Jess, Karen said, her smile fake as she noticed me. We were just about to call you. Right. The funeral was a masterclass in family politics. I was stuck in the back row, behind relatives who hadn't seen Grandpa in years. Uncle Tom gave a eulogy about Grandpa's lumber business, as if that was all he'd been. I wasn't asked to speak, even though I'd spent more time with Grandpa than anyone. I kept thinking about his words, making things right. I didn't know then how much weight they carried. 2 weeks later, I was heating up leftovers in my tiny apartment when my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, clearly not meant for me, will reading tomorrow, 3 p.m. at Carter's office. Mom says don't tell Jess. My heart dropped. A follow-up came seconds later, wrong chat, ignore that. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched. They were cutting me out completely. I barely slept that night, torn between staying away to keep the peace and showing up for Grandpa. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Grandpa would have wanted me to be there, to hear his wishes, even if I got nothing. I called in sick to work, something I never do, picked out a simple gray dress Grandpa always liked, and drove to Carter's law office downtown. My hands shook the whole way, but I kept hearing Grandpa's voice, stand tall, Jess. You've got as much right as anyone. The office was in a sleek building, all glass and steel. When I stepped off the elevator, I saw them, Uncle Tom, Aunt Karen, Sarah, Ethan, Uncle Dave, even a distant cousin, Mark, who barely knew Grandpa. They were huddled in the waiting area, whispering. Aunt Karen spotted me first, her eyes narrowing. "Jess, what are you doing here?" she said, loud enough to turn heads. I squared my shoulders. "I'm here for Grandpa's will." Uncle Tom stepped forward, his face hard. "This is for family, Jess. You weren't invited." I held his gaze. "I am family." Sarah scoffed. "Family who respects Grandpa's choices, not someone trying to play hero." Before I could snap back, the office door opened, and Mr. Carter, the lawyer, stepped out. "Everyone here for Frank Harper's estate?" he asked, then noticed the tension. "Is there an issue?" Aunt Karen put on her sweetest voice. "Mr. Carter, there's a mix-up. Jess wasn't supposed to be included today. We've already discussed most of the estate." My face burned as everyone stared. Mr. Carter frowned, checking his notes. "Jessica Harper, Frank's granddaughter?" I nodded. "That's me." He looked puzzled. "Then you're definitely meant to be here. Please, come in." The conference room was all polished wood and leather chairs. I sat near the door, feeling like an intruder. Whispers followed me, "She must have found out somehow. Tom's gonna lose it." Mr. Carter cleared his throat, silencing the room. "I've known Frank for 25 years, both as his lawyer and friend. He was clear about his wishes, and I'll honor them exactly." Aunt Karen cut in. "Mr. Carter, we've already divided most things. Jess doesn't need to be here." He held up a hand. "There's been a misunderstanding. Nothing should have been divided yet." He looked at me, then opened a folder. "And excluding Ms. Harper would be odd, considering she's the only name in the will." The room went still. Uncle Tom's jaw dropped. "That's not possible," he said, voice tight. Mr. Carter's eyes had a glint of something, satisfaction. "Maybe. No mistake. Let me read Frank's will as he intended." He started with the formal stuff, then got to the point. "I, Franklin James Harper, being of sound mind, leave all my property, my cabin at 12, Pine Road, my river cabin, all financial accounts, personal items, and family heirlooms, to my granddaughter, Jessica Marie Harper." A glass hit the floor, Ethan's coffee mug, shattered. Nobody moved. "This isn't legal," Uncle Tom barked. Mr. Carter didn't flinch. Frank anticipated challenges. He had 3 doctors confirm his mental clarity in the last year. He also left a letter for Jess to be read privately, explaining his choice. I sat there, stunned, as Aunt Karen's face crumpled, mascara streaking. Sarah whispered, "We'll fight this." But Mr. Carter wasn't done. Frank kept records, visits, calls, even security footage from the cabin. He knew exactly what was happening around him. My family's eyes burned into me, but all I could think was, "Grandpa, what did you do?" The air in Mr. Carter's office felt like it had been sucked out after he read Grandpa's will. My Uncle Tom's face was beet red, his fists clenched on the table. Aunt Karen was crying, not the quiet kind, but loud, messy sobs that made everyone uncomfortable. Sarah was glaring at me like I'd stolen something, and Ethan just stared at the floor, his shattered coffee mug still scattered across the hardwood. I sat there, my hands gripping Grandpa's letter, trying to process what just happened. Me, the sole heir? It didn't feel real. Mr. Carter's voice cut through the chaos. "There's more, but let's address the immediate concerns." He slid a sealed envelope across the table to me. "Jess, Frank wanted you to have this privately, but you might want to share parts of it with the family." I nodded, barely able to move, and tucked it into my bag. I wasn't ready to read it in front of them. Uncle Tom stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "This is your fault, Jess," he spat, pointing at me. "You filled his head with nonsense, turned him against us." I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. My throat was tight, and all I could think about was Grandpa's voice, calm and steady, saying he'd make things right. Aunt Karen chimed in, her voice shaky. "We took care of him, Jess. We paid for his medications, his caregivers. And this is how he repays us." Mr. Carter raised a hand. Frank was meticulous. He documented everything, visits, conversations, even items removed from his cabin without permission. Aunt Karen's eyes widened, and I saw Ethan shift uncomfortably. "What items?" she asked, her voice sharp. Mr. Carter opened another folder. "For example, the antique fishing rod from the river cabin, now in Tom's garage. Or the silver candlesticks Karen gave to Sarah last Christmas. Frank had cameras installed 2 years ago. He kept an inventory with photos." The room went quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, guilty, cornered. Uncle Tom's voice dropped low. "That's absurd. Those were gifts." Mr. Carter didn't blink. "Frank's will specifies that any items taken without consent must be returned within 30 days, or legal action will follow." I could feel their eyes burning into me, but I didn't look up. All I could think was how Grandpa had seen it all, their greed, their assumptions, and still chose me. I left the office with Uncle Tom's parting shot ringing in my ears. This isn't over, Jess. You'll regret this. I drove home in a daze, the envelope in my bag feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Aunt Karen called at 6 a.m., her voice all fake concern. Jess, we need to talk. Dad wasn't himself. You know that. Let's figure out what's fair. Then Sarah, leaving a voicemail. Hey, Jess, that old radio in Grandpa's study? He told me I could have it years ago. Can you just let me grab it? Even Uncle Dave, who'd been silent for months, texted, we should discuss the river cabin. It's not right for one person to have it all. I stopped answering after the 5th call. By noon, I had 12 voicemails, each one a mix of accusations. Or barely veiled attempts to claim something. Then it spilled online. Sarah posted on social media, some people will do anything for money, even hurt their own family. Sad. Comments from distant relatives I hadn't seen in years piled up. Calling me selfish, a manipulator. I locked my accounts and turned off notifications, but the weight of it all settled in my chest. Work became my escape, but even that wasn't safe. My supervisor, Linda, pulled me aside after I mixed up a patient's therapy schedule, a mistake I'd never made before. Jess, you seem off. Everything okay? She asked, her eyes kind but worried. I spilled it all, the will, the family drama, the endless calls. She frowned, then hugged me. Take a few days off. You're no good to your patients like this. I hated leaving work, but she was right. I was a mess, barely sleeping, my head pounding constantly. That night, I went to Grandpa's cabin, my cabin now, I guess. Walking through the door, I expected to feel him there, in the smell of pine and old leather. But something was wrong. The walls looked bare, the shelves half empty. The carved wooden clock on the mantel was gone. So was the old quilt from the couch, the one Grandpa's mom had made. I checked his bedroom, and his tackle box, full of fishing lures he'd collected for decades, was missing. My stomach churned. They'd already started taking things. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of what was missing, and cried until my eyes burned. It wasn't about the money those things were worth. It was the memories they held, summers by the river, evenings by the fire, Grandpa's laugh when he'd tell me about the fish that got away. I felt like they were stealing him from me all over again. Then I found it, a small safe tucked in the back of his closet. I tried a few combinations, my birthday, his wedding anniversary, until I used the date he started his lumber business. It clicked open. Inside was a notebook, a couple of USB drives, and a note in Grandpa's shaky handwriting, for Jess, when the time comes. I opened the notebook, and my breath caught. Pages and pages of entries, detailing every visit, every conversation. One from last year stood out. Tom came by today, spent 5 minutes asking about my health, then 45 talking about selling the river cabin. Said Dolores, he called it a waste of money. Doesn't know I had it appraised, worth more than he thinks. Jess gets it. She always has. Another entry, from 6 months ago, Karen and Sarah visited. Karen kept me talking while Sarah slipped upstairs. Found my pocket watch missing after they left. Checked the cameras, Sarah took it. Added to the inventory. My hands shook as I read. He'd known. He'd been watching them, documenting everything. The USB drives had photos, emails, even audio files of conversations. One recording caught Uncle Tom saying, Dad, you don't need all this stuff. Let us handle it. Grandpa's voice, firm, it's not about need, Tom. It's about legacy. I called Mr. Carter the next morning, my voice steady for the first time in days. They've been taking things. I found proof. He sighed, like he'd expected it. Frank warned me this might happen. Bring everything to my office. We'll get you a lawyer who eats cases like this for breakfast. Her name was Emily Ruiz, a sharp-eyed attorney in her 40s who didn't mess around. She flipped through Grandpa's notebook, her jaw tight. This is airtight. Your grandpa was a genius. She started drafting letters demanding the return of every stolen item, backed by photos and recordings. We'll give them a week to comply, she said. After that, we go to court. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. Grandpa hadn't just left me his stuff, he'd left me a shield to protect it. But the fight was just beginning, and I knew my family wasn't going to back down easy. The weeks after finding Grandpa's safe were a blur of anger and exhaustion. Emily Ruiz, my lawyer, was a force of nature, moving fast to protect what Grandpa left me. She sent out cease and desist letters to Uncle Tom, Aunt Karen, Sarah, Ethan, and even a few distant relatives who'd helped themselves to keepsakes from the cabin. The letters listed every missing item, the carved clock, the quilt, the pocket watch, the fishing lures, with photos and timestamps from Grandpa's cameras. We've got them dead to rights, Emily said, her voice calm but fierce. Your grandpa built a case that's practically bulletproof. But my family didn't go quietly. Uncle Tom called me that same day, his voice low and threatening. Jess, you're making a mistake. This'll tear us all apart. Drop it, and we can work something out. I hung up, my hands shaking. I wasn't backing down, not after what I'd found. The harassment didn't stop at calls. Aunt Karen started contacting my coworkers at the Veterans Clinic, dropping hints that I was unreliable and caught up in a shady inheritance scheme. One morning, my supervisor, Linda, called me into her office, her face tight. Jess, I got a call from your aunt. She's saying you neglected patients to cozy up to your grandpa. It's nonsense, but it's stirring things up. I felt sick. My job was everything, helping vets regain mobility, hearing their stories, making a difference. Now my family was trying to ruin that too. Linda put a hand on my shoulder. I know it's not true, but we need to address this. Document everything, Jess. Protect yourself. That night, I started getting headaches that wouldn't quit, and sleep became a distant memory. My doctor prescribed something for anxiety, warning me, this kind of family stress can break you if you don't take care of yourself. Then the story hit the local news. A reporter from a Portland paper emailed me, can you comment on the Harper family dispute over your grandfather's estate? It's causing a stir. I don't know who leaked it, probably Uncle Tom, trying to spin the narrative, but suddenly my name was in articles, painted as the greedy granddaughter who'd stolen the family legacy. Social media got uglier. Sarah posted a cryptic rant, some people will lie and cheat to get what they don't deserve. Family isn't supposed to be like this. Random cousins I hadn't seen since I was a kid piled on, calling me a vulture. I deleted my accounts, but the damage was done. I started keeping my curtains drawn, feeling like the whole town was watching me. One evening, alone in my apartment, I hit rock bottom. I sat on the couch, Grandpa's letter in my hands, wondering if it was worth it. Maybe I should just give it all up, the cabin, the money, everything, to make it stop. Then my phone pinged with a text from Rosa, Grandpa's caregiver. Jess, I have something for you. Frank gave it to me before he passed. Can we meet? The next day, she handed me a small metal box. He said to keep this safe for you, away from the family. You'd know what to do. Inside were memory cards and a tiny digital recorder. My heart raced as I plugged the first card into my laptop. There were videos, dozens of them, of Grandpa sitting in his favorite chair by the cabin window, talking to the camera. My name is Franklin James Harper, he said in the first one, dated a year before his death. I'm recording this of my own free will, fully sound in mind, as my lawyer, Mr. Carter, can confirm. The camera panned to Mr. Carter, who nodded and stated the date. Grandpa went on, his voice steady. I've watched my family for years. I've seen who shows up for me and who shows up for what I own. I'm leaving everything to my granddaughter, Jess, because she's the only one who's been here for the right reasons. He listed specific moments, Uncle Tom pushing to sell the river cabin, Aunt Karen taking his watch, Sarah sneaking off with a painting during a visit. Every video was like that, clear and detailed, leaving no room for doubt. In one, he held up the silver ring he'd given me. This was my mother's. I gave it to Jess because she understands its worth isn't in dollars. The others would have sold it. The last video was filmed just a month before he died. He looked weaker, his hands trembling, but his eyes were sharp. Jess, if you're watching this, things have probably gotten ugly. I'm sorry for that. But you're strong, like I was, like your dad was. Don't let them bully you. I left you everything because I trust you to honor what matters. Stand your ground, kid. I cried watching it, not just from sadness but from relief. Grandpa hadn't just left me his stuff, he'd given me the tools to fight for it. I called Emily the next morning and brought her the videos. She watched a few, her eyes wide. This isn't just a case, Jess. It's a slam dunk. Your grandpa was a mastermind. Emily got to work, filing a detailed report with the probate court, listing every stolen item with Grandpa's photos, videos, and notebook entries as evidence. She sent new letters to the family, this time with a shorter deadline: return everything in 5 days, or we'd press charges for theft. She also filed a motion to dismiss Uncle Tom's lawsuit against the will, attaching Grandpa's videos as proof he was sharp as a tack when he made his decision. No judge will argue with this, she said, grinning. Your grandpa made sure of it. We also contacted the clinic's legal team about Aunt Karen's calls. They sent cease and desist letters to her and anyone else spreading lies, threatening defamation suits if it continued. To strengthen the case, I reached out to Rosa and a few nurses who'd helped Grandpa in his final months. They didn't hesitate. You were there all the time, Jess, Rosa said, handing me a log she'd kept of every visitor. It showed I'd been to the cabin 58 times in Grandpa's last year. Uncle Tom? 6 visits. Aunt Karen? 8. Sarah and Ethan? Only holidays, and even then, they'd leave early. One nurse, Carla, wrote a statement. Jess was the only one who brought Frank meals, helped with his exercises, and just sat with him. The others barely showed up. We also dug up financial records showing Uncle Tom had borrowed thousands from Grandpa's accounts over the years, never repaid, and Aunt Karen had used his credit card for care expenses that looked a lot like spa days and fancy dinners. Emily suggested a family meeting at her office to lay it all out. Sometimes you show your cards to avoid a long fight, she said. I agreed, though my stomach was in knots. The day of the meeting, I got there early, clutching a coffee to steady my nerves. Uncle Tom walked in with his lawyer, a twitchy guy who kept checking his phone. Aunt Karen wouldn't look at me. Sarah and Ethan sat stiffly, like they were waiting for a bomb to drop. Emily started calm but firm. We're here to resolve issues with Frank Harper's estate. Tom's lawyer jumped in, rattling off claims about undue influence and mental incapacity. Emily let him finish, then turned on the screen behind her. Grandpa's face appeared, his voice filling the room. My name is Franklin James Harper. I'm leaving everything to Jess because she's the only one who cared about me, not my money. You could have heard a pin drop. Uncle Tom went pale. Aunt Karen gripped her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. Sarah started crying, and Ethan just stared at the table. When the video ended, Emily spoke. There are 15 more like this, plus photos, recordings, and logs. We've also documented $350,000 worth of items removed from Frank's properties. She slid a spreadsheet across the table, showing every missing item, where it was, and how we knew. Jess is prepared to file theft charges if these aren't returned in 5 days. We also have evidence of financial misconduct that could interest the authorities. Tom's lawyer whispered something to him, and for the first time, Uncle Tom didn't argue. The meeting ended with them asking for time to review the evidence. I left feeling like I'd just survived a storm, but it wasn't over yet. The family meeting at Emily's office left me drained but strangely empowered. For the first time, I felt like Grandpa's plan was working. His videos, his notebook, his meticulous records, they were my armor against the family's attacks. But the fallout was immediate. Uncle Tom's lawyer called Emily 2 days later, saying they'd dropped the lawsuit contesting the will. They know they can't win, Emily told me, her voice steady. Your grandpa's evidence is too strong. By the end of the week, stuff started showing up at the cabin. A moving van dropped off the carved clock, wrapped carefully but with no note. A courier delivered the pocket watch and a box of fishing lures, all in pristine condition. Aunt Karen sent the quilt through a delivery service, folded neatly but without a word of explanation. It was progress, but it felt hollow. No apologies, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just compliance, like they were checking a box. I thought that might be the end of it, but the family wasn't done fighting. Aunt Karen called me a few days later, her tone softer than usual. Jess, we need to talk. We didn't realize how much you meant to Dad. Can we meet? I was wary, but something in her voice sounded genuine, so I agreed to coffee at a neutral spot, a small diner near my apartment. When I got there, she was already seated, stirring her tea nervously. We thought you were manipulating him, she said, not meeting my eyes. You were always there, and we weren't. We got it wrong. I waited, expecting more, but she just sipped her tea. I spent time with him because I loved him. I said finally. Not because I wanted anything. She nodded, her lips tight. Some of us want to make this right. Maybe not Tom, but me, Sarah, maybe Ethan. I told her I'd think about it. I wasn't ready to forgive, not after everything back at the cabin. I started sorting through what had been returned. The quilt was back on the couch, the clock ticking softly on the mantel. But some things were still missing, smaller items, like Grandpa's old pipe and a photo album from his lumber days. I wondered if they'd ever come back or if they were lost forever. The process of reclaiming the estate was taking a toll. My headaches were worse, and I'd started having nightmares about the family meeting, Uncle Tom's voice echoing, "This isn't over." My doctor upped my anxiety meds and suggested therapy. You're carrying trauma from this, Jess, she said. It's not just about the stuff, it's the betrayal. She was right. Every returned item felt like a small victory, but it also reminded me of how far my family had gone to hurt me. One afternoon, while cleaning out Grandpa's desk, I found another envelope tucked in a drawer, labeled, "For Jess, after the dust settles." My heart skipped as I opened it. Inside was a letter in his familiar scrawl. Dear Jess, it began, if you're reading this, you've weathered the worst of it. I'm sorry for the mess I left you in, but I knew you could handle it. This wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about trusting you to carry what matters forward. Your dad had the same heart, always fixing things, never chasing money. You're the same. don't let this change you. Use it to do good, like you always have. Keep the river cabin for the family, for the kids you might have someday. And when the time's right, let the others back in, not because they've earned it, but because you're better than grudges. I love you, kid. I'm proud of you. Grandpa Frank. I read it over and over, tears staining the paper. Even now, he was guiding me, reminding me who I was. I decided to start small, following his advice. I called Sarah first, offering her a chance to pick one item from the cabin, something sentimental, not valuable. She hesitated, then asked for Grandpa's old recipe book. He showed me how to make his cornbread once, she said quietly. I want my daughter to know it. Ethan surprised me by asking for a fishing rod, not the antique one, but a cheap one Grandpa used when they went to the river as kids. It's stupid, but it's a good memory, he mumbled. Aunt Karen chose a small painting Grandpa had done of the river at dawn. He painted it when he was courting your grandma, she said. I always loved it. Uncle Tom didn't respond to my offer. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. The court finalized everything a month later, confirming me as the sole heir. The cabin, the river property, the bank accounts, everything was mine. But the victory didn't feel like I'd imagined. The family I'd grown up with was fractured, maybe beyond repair. I stood on the cabin porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the pines, and whispered to Grandpa, "You saw it all, didn't you? You knew." His letter had said to use the inheritance to do good, so I started planning. I set up a scholarship in Grandpa's name at the community college for students studying trades, mechanics, carpentry, things he'd valued. I began researching a program to help elderly veterans with physical therapy, something I'd dreamed about at the clinic. And I kept the river cabin, picturing future summers there, maybe with a family of my own someday. Healing with the family came in fits and starts. Sarah reached out again, asking to bring her daughter to the cabin. I want her to know who Grandpa was, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. I agreed, and when they came, we sat on the porch swing, flipping through the recipe book. She laughed when I showed her the smoked paprika trick. I never knew, she admitted. Ethan showed up to his cousin's barbecue and pulled me aside to say, I'm sorry for how it went down. I didn't get it then. It wasn't much, but it was something. Aunt Karen sent a card with a note, your grandpa would be proud of the scholarship. It's what he would have wanted. Uncle Tom stayed silent, his pride too big to bend. I left the door open, but I wasn't holding my breath. Then I got a call from someone unexpected, Grandpa's cousin, Ellen, who lived in Seattle. She'd heard about the drama through the family grapevine and wanted to meet. Over coffee, she shared stories about Grandpa I'd never heard, how he'd helped her family when they lost their house in the 80s, how he and my dad used to fix cars together as teenagers. Frank always said you were like your dad, she told me. He chose you because you live like he did, for people, not things. Meeting Ellen felt like finding a piece of Grandpa I thought I'd lost. She introduced me to her kids, my second cousins, who didn't care about the inheritance mess. They just wanted to hear about the man who'd meant so much to me. The legal battles were winding down, but the emotional ones lingered. Every time I walked into the cabin, I felt Grandpa's presence in the creak of the floorboards, the smell of pine. I was starting to see what he'd meant in his letter, not to let the money change me, but to let it amplify who I already was. I wasn't just fighting for his stuff, I was fighting for his values, for the life he'd lived and wanted me to carry forward. It was heavy, but it was also what kept me going. The cabin started feeling like home again, not just Grandpa's place but mine too. I'd walk through the rooms, touching the returned quilt, the ticking clock, and feel a quiet strength settling in. It wasn't just about winning the legal fight, it was about honoring what Grandpa stood for. I took a leave from the Veterans Clinic to focus on the estate, figuring out what to do with the money and properties he'd left me. It was overwhelming, having options I'd never dreamed of, but also a chance to make something real out of his trust in me. I kept his letter close, reading it whenever doubt crept in. His words, don't let this change you. Use it to become more yourself, were like a compass, pointing me toward what mattered. I threw myself into the projects Grandpa's letter inspired. The scholarship I'd set up in his name was already getting applications, kids from small towns like ours, wanting to learn trades like welding or carpentry. I'd read their essays late at night, smiling at how much they sounded like Grandpa, all grit and big dreams. The Veterans Therapy program was taking shape too. I met with a local nonprofit to plan free physical therapy sessions for elderly vets, using part of the inheritance to fund it. It felt right, like I was carrying forward the way Grandpa always helped people without expecting anything back. The river cabin, though, I kept untouched. I could still see us there, fishing at dawn, him telling me stories about the fish that got away. I wanted it to stay a place for family, maybe not the one I had now, but the one I might build someday. The family situation was trickier. Sarah's visit with her daughter, Lily, was a small step forward. We sat on the porch swing, Lily giggling as we showed her how to mix Grandpa's cornbread batter. "You gotta add the paprika just right," I told her, winking at Sarah. She smiled, a real one, not the fake kind she used to flash at family dinners. "I want Lily to know him like you did," she said softly. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Ethan came by once, awkward but trying. He brought the fishing rod he'd asked for and showed me a photo of him and Grandpa at the river when he was 10. "I forgot how much I liked those days," he said, his voice low. "I got caught up in Dad's world." I nodded, not sure what to say. It was something, but it didn't erase the years of distance. Aunt Karen was harder to read. After her card, she called once, asking if she could visit the cabin. I said yes, mostly because Grandpa's letter told me to leave room for reconciliation. She showed up with the painting she'd chosen, holding it like it was fragile. "I hung it in my guest room," she said, her eyes on the floor. "It reminds me of Mom and Dad's early days." We walked through the cabin, and for the first time, she talked about Grandpa without mentioning money, how he'd taught her to fish, how he'd always smelled like sawdust. Before she left, she hugged me, quick and stiff. "I'm sorry, Jess. I didn't see what he needed." I didn't know if I believed her, but I let it sit. Uncle Tom was a lost cause. He sent a lawyer's letter agreeing to return the last of the stolen items, a set of old tools, but nothing personal. I accepted it and moved on. Then I got a surprise. Ellen, Grandpa's cousin from Seattle, invited me to a family reunion. With her side of the family, people I'd never met because they'd drifted from the Portland crew. I flew out, nervous but curious. Ellen's house was warm, full of laughter and kids running around. Her daughter, Mia, pulled out a box of photos, Grandpa as a young man, grinning next to my dad, both covered in grease from fixing cars. "Frank was the glue," Ellen said over dinner. "He never cared about the money, just the people." Her son, Caleb, showed me a letter Grandpa had written him years ago, encouraging him to start his own business. It was like finding pieces of Grandpa I'd thought were gone. This branch of the family didn't know about the will drama, and they didn't care. They just wanted to share stories and keep his memory alive. Back home, I decided to host a memorial for Grandpa at the cabin, a year after his death. I invited only the people who'd really cared: Rosa, a couple of nurses, Mr. Carter, a few neighbors who'd checked on him over the years, Ellen and her kids, and, after some thought, Sarah and Lily. I set up the porch with lanterns and served Grandpa's cornbread and burgers, the air filled with that smoky paprika smell. We swapped stories, Rosa about how Grandpa snuck her extra cookies, Ellen about his pranks as a kid. Sarah surprised me by sharing a memory of Grandpa teaching her to skip rocks at the river. "I didn't appreciate it then," she admitted, holding Lily close. "I do now." Mr. Carter pulled me aside as the night wound down, a glass of cider in his hand. "Frank would have loved this, Jess. You're doing exactly what he wanted, keeping the heart of this place alive." Standing on the porch later, watching fireflies blink in the dark, I felt a weight lift. The inheritance had cost me a lot: relationships, sleep, pieces of my peace, but it had given me something deeper. Grandpa didn't just leave me his stuff, he left me his belief in doing right, in valuing people over things. I whispered to the night, "We're getting there, Grandpa. It's not perfect, but we're getting there." The cabin felt full again, not with objects, but with the life he'd wanted for it. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, some family wounds might never heal, but I was ready to keep going, to live the way he'd taught me. The memorial dinner marked a shift, like the air had cleared after a long storm. The cabin was starting to feel like a home again, not just a battleground. I'd been back at the Veterans Clinic for a few weeks, easing into my routine of helping vets with their rehab, listening to their stories of old wars and new struggles. But the inheritance, and Grandpa's letter, kept pulling me toward something bigger. His words about using the money to be more myself stuck with me, and I was starting to see what that meant. I wasn't just Jess, the physical therapist. I was Jess, the keeper of Grandpa's legacy, someone who could make a difference beyond my little corner of Portland. The scholarship program was growing faster than I'd expected. We'd funded 6 students already, kids who wanted to be electricians, plumbers, carpenters, just like Grandpa had been before he built his lumber business. I'd meet with them sometimes, hearing their plans over coffee at the diner. One kid, Marcus, reminded me so much of Grandpa: quiet, hands calloused from working odd jobs, but with a spark in his eyes when he talked about building houses. "This scholarship's giving me a shot I never thought I'd have," he told me. I smiled, thinking of Grandpa's grin when he'd talk about fixing the world one job at a time. The Veterans Therapy program was coming together too. We'd secured a small space near the clinic, and I was working with a couple of therapists to set up free sessions for elderly vets. Every step felt like a nod to Grandpa, like he was still guiding me. The cabin itself was changing, slowly becoming mine while keeping its soul. I added a few touches: a new rug in the living room, a set of wind chimes on the porch that sang in the breeze, a small garden out back where I planted herbs Grandpa loved, like rosemary and thyme. But I kept the core of it the same: the creaky swing, the quilt on the couch, the photos of him and Dad on the mantel. The river cabin stayed untouched, a promise to keep it for the future. I'd go there sometimes, just to sit by the water and feel him there, the way he'd been when we'd fished together. Those moments kept me grounded when the family drama crept back in. Sarah was trying harder than I expected. She'd started texting me photos of Lily, asking if she could bring her to the cabin again. One Saturday, they showed up with a batch of cornbread they'd tried to make using Grandpa's recipe. It was a little too salty, but Lily's proud grin made it worth eating. "We're getting better," Sarah said, laughing. "Next time, we'll nail it." We sat on the porch, talking about small things: Lily's school, Sarah's new job, avoiding the heavier stuff. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ethan reached out too, inviting me to a family barbecue. I went, half expecting a cold shoulder, but he introduced me to his fiancée, Claire, who seemed to know the whole story and didn't care. "You're the one keeping Frank's memory alive," she whispered when Ethan stepped away. He didn't say much, but he gave me a nod when I left, like we'd crossed some invisible line. Aunt Karen was trickier. She'd call every few weeks, leaving voicemails that danced around apology without quite landing there. "Jess, I'd love to talk about the cabin sometime," she'd say, or, "I found an old photo of Dad you might like." I wasn't sure if she was genuine or just trying to stay in my good graces now that the will was settled. I met her for lunch once, at her request. She brought the photo, a grainy shot of Grandpa and her as kids, fishing at the river. "He was always my hero," she said, her eyes misty. I wanted to believe her, but the years of her scheming lingered. "I'm glad you have good memories," I said carefully. "Maybe we can share more sometime." She nodded, but we both knew it'd take time to rebuild anything real. Uncle Tom was a wall. He'd returned the last of the stolen items, an old toolbox and a set of carved bookends, but never reached out directly. I heard through Sarah that he was still bitter, telling anyone who'd listened that I'd stolen the family legacy. I let it go. Grandpa's letter had warned me not everyone would come around, and I was okay with that. Some doors stay closed, and that's just life. But other doors were opening. Ellen, Grandpa's cousin, became a regular in my life. She'd fly down from Seattle every few months, bringing her kids or grandkids. We'd spend hours in the cabin, sorting through old letters and photos, piecing together stories about Grandpa's life I'd never known. Her daughter, Mia, was my age, and we clicked fast. "You're like the sister I never had," she said once, half joking, as we grilled burgers using Grandpa's recipe. Having her around felt like finding family I didn't know I needed. One evening, while digging through Grandpa's attic, I found a box labeled Frank's Keepsakes. Inside were things I hadn't seen before: a journal from his early days in the lumber business, a stack of postcards he'd sent my dad when he traveled, a small carving of a fish he'd made as a kid. The journal was full of his thoughts. Raw and real, about building something from nothing, about wanting to leave a mark that wasn't just money. One entry hit me hard: "I hope Jess grows up knowing what's worth fighting for. Not the cash, but the heart of it all." I sat there, tears dripping onto the pages, feeling like he was speaking directly to me. It was a reminder of why I was doing this, not for the cabin or the bank account, but for the man who'd raised me to see the world differently. I started hosting small gatherings at the cabin, not just for family but for the community. A barbecue for the scholarship kids, a potluck for the vets in the therapy program, a storytelling night for neighbors who'd known Grandpa. Each one felt like a step toward making the cabin what he'd wanted: a place of connection, not division. Rosa came to one, bringing her famous tamales. "Frank would be proud, Jess," she said, squeezing my hand. Mr. Carter stopped by another, his usual suit swapped for jeans. "You're building something special here," he told me. "Most people would have sold the place and moved on." I shook my head. "This is home." It's what he wanted. As winter rolled in, I felt myself settling into a new rhythm. The legal fights were over, the estate was mine, and the family drama was quieter, if not gone. I was learning to live with the scars. Some relationships were mending, others might never. But I was okay with that. Grandpa had given me more than money, he'd given me a purpose. I looked at the river cabin in my mind, picturing kids running around it someday, learning to fish the way he'd taught me. I looked at the scholarship kids, the vets getting back on their feet, and saw his heart in all of it. Standing on the porch one night, the air crisp and the stars bright, I whispered, "I'm trying, Grandpa. I hope I'm making Framingham proud." The wind chimes answered, and for a moment, it felt like he was right there with me. Winter turned to spring, and the cabin bloomed with new life. The herb garden I'd planted was thriving: rosemary, thyme, a touch of lavender. Grandpa would have loved. I'd settled into a routine, balancing my work at the Veterans Clinic with the projects I'd started in Grandpa's name. The scholarship program was now funding 10 students, each one a reminder of his belief in hard work over handouts. The Veterans Therapy program had its first official session, with 3 old-timers showing up to work on their mobility and swap stories over coffee afterward. I'd sit with them, listening to tales of Vietnam and Desert Storm, feeling like Grandpa was in the room, nodding along. The cabin was no longer just a house, it was a hub, a place where people came together, just like he'd always wanted. The family situation wasn't perfect, but it was better than I'd hoped. Sarah and Lily became regulars at the cabin. One sunny afternoon, Lily ran around the garden, chasing butterflies while Sarah and I baked cornbread, finally getting the paprika just right. "You know," Sarah said, wiping flour off her hands, "I was jealous of you. You had this bond with Grandpa I never got. I'm trying to make up for it now." Her honesty caught me off guard, but it felt good, like a crack in the wall between us. I told her about the river cabin, how I wanted to keep it for family, maybe for Lily someday. She smiled, a little sad. "I'd like that. For her." Ethan was slower to come around, but he'd text now and then, sharing a memory or asking about the therapy program. At a family picnic, he brought Claire and their new puppy, and we ended up laughing about Grandpa's terrible fishing puns. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was progress. Aunt Karen was still a puzzle. She'd visit the cabin occasionally, always bringing something: a photo, a recipe card, once even a pair of Grandpa's old work gloves she'd found in her attic. "I don't know if you want these," she'd say, her voice hesitant. I'd take them, sensing she was trying to bridge the gap, but the trust wasn't there yet. One day, she showed up with a letter Grandpa had written her years ago, when she was a teenager struggling with school. "He believed in me," she said, her eyes misty. "I forgot that until now." I nodded, not ready to forgive but willing to listen. "He believed in all of us," I said. "Just in different ways." Uncle Tom stayed distant, his silence louder than any argument. I heard through Ellen that he'd sold his big house and moved to a condo, maybe to cut costs after the legal fees. I left the door open, but I wasn't chasing him. Ellen and her family became my anchor. Mia, her daughter, started visiting every couple of months, bringing her kids to play in the garden or fish at the river cabin. We'd sit up late, swapping stories about Grandpa, how he'd sneak candy to her as a kid, how he'd taught my dad to carve wood. Mia helped me digitize Grandpa's old journals and letters, creating an archive for the family. "This is bigger than the money," she said one night, scanning a photo of Grandpa and Dad at the lumber yard. "This is who we are." Her words hit me hard, reminding me why I was fighting so hard to protect his legacy. Through her, I met more cousins, people who'd grown up hearing about Grandpa but never got caught in the inheritance mess. They didn't care about the will, they just wanted to know the man behind it. One day, while sorting through the attic, I found a small wooden box I'd missed before. Inside was a locket with a photo of Grandpa and my grandma, young and laughing, plus a note in his handwriting: "For Jess, to remind you where you come from." I wore the locket to the next scholarship event, feeling him with me as I handed out awards to the students. Marcus, the kid who reminded me of Grandpa, gave a speech about how the scholarship let him start his own carpentry business. "I want to build things that last," he said, and I swear I heard Grandpa's voice in his words. Afterward, I pulled Mr. Carter aside. He'd become a friend, stopping by the cabin for coffee or to check on the programs. "You're doing it, Jess," he said, looking around at the crowd. "Frank didn't just give you his stuff. He gave you his vision." The biggest step came in the summer, when I took a trip to the Oregon coast, a place Grandpa and I had always talked about visiting. I stood on the cliffs, the wind whipping my hair, and felt closer to him than ever. I scattered a handful of his ashes into the ocean, something he'd mentioned wanting in one of his journals. "You're free now, Grandpa," I whispered, the locket heavy against my chest. Back home, I hosted a second memorial at the cabin, bigger this time. Rosa brought her tamales, Ellen and Mia came with their families, and Sarah showed up with Lily and a tray of cornbread. Even Aunt Karen came, bringing that painting of the river she'd chosen. We ate, laughed, and told stories under the stars, the porch swing creaking like it always had. It was the kind of night Grandpa would have loved, simple, real, full of heart. As the guests left, I stood on the porch, watching the fireflies dance. The cabin was mine, but it was more than that, it was a promise kept. Grandpa had seen me, really seen me, and trusted me to carry his values forward. The inheritance had nearly broken me, tearing apart the family I'd known, but it had also built something new. Not just the programs or the cabin, but a sense of who I was. I'd lost Uncle Tom, maybe forever, and parts of my relationship with Aunt Karen and the others would always be fragile. But I'd gained Ellen, Mia, and a family I hadn't known I had. I'd gained the courage to stand up for what mattered, just like Grandpa taught me. I looked at his photo on the mantel, his eyes crinkling with that familiar grin. "We did it, Grandpa," I said softly. "We made it right." The wind chimes sang in the breeze, and I felt him there, proud and steady. If you've ever had to fight for what's right, even when it costs you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this journey resonated with you, hit that subscribe button, it helps keep these stories alive. Grandpa taught me that the real inheritance isn't money or things, it's the love and lessons we carry forward. Thanks for listening to mine.